So again, if I skip over some things, it's just in the interest of time. But again, thank you so much for having me tonight. My name is Katie Ludwig. I'm with the Government Finance Officers Association. I do, at GFOA, I do a little bit of research, consulting, and training, all focused really on local government budgeting. It's something I really care a lot about and passionate about and really interested in it. So I'm really, really happy to be working on this project with you all. So let's go ahead and jump in here. This slide just shows GFOA developed this framework. We call it our Financial Foundations for Thriving Communities framework. It really kind of outlines really some principles, pillars for doing budgeting better as we go forward. So we really kind of built the recommendations on these 5 pillars here, and those are looking at a long-term vision, building trust and open communication, using collective decision-making, creating clear rules, and then treating everyone fairly. So just a little bit of background there. We kind of kept all of these in mind as we were developing these recommendations. So we have 6 recommendations for you all related to your budget. And you can see we kind of broke them down here into 3 phases, if you will, looking at sort of some shorter term recommendations, some intermediate term recommendations, and then a long-term recommendation. And I will mention that the timeframes I have up here, you can see with the short term, I say, 3 to 6 months, intermediate 6 to 12, long-term 12 plus months. Those were really sort of suggestions, but again, it's really, there's flexibility there. These aren't things that need to be done right away. They're just things that I do think some you could probably do sooner rather than later, just because they're a little bit easier to bite off, if you will. But I will say there's nothing that these timeframes need to be set in stone or anything like that. Again, there's lots of flexibility there. So I'm going to go through each of these recommendations. I'll probably spend the bulk of my time talking about recommendations 1, 2, and 3. Again, those are really linked together there and kind of build upon one another. And then I'll go a little bit more quickly through recommendations 4 through 6. So the first recommendation is to review and update the city's financial policies. And I did a high-level review of your existing policies. I compared that. GFOA has a book called Financial Policies that outlines sort of essential policies and then also highly advisable policies. So things that we think are really, really critical and those that we think are important, but maybe not quite as critical. So, those are listed here, what the essential ones are and what the highly advisable ones are. And then in each of these areas, we have recommendations on what should be included in each of those policies. So I looked at all of those and again, compared the city's existing policies. And in terms of the essential policy areas, these are some areas where we think the city does need to develop some additional policies. These were sort of missing from what you currently have. So some reserve policies, operating budget policies, capital improvement plan, capital budgeting policies. We'll talk more about that in a minute. Capital asset maintenance and long-term financial planning policies. And then we have some additional recommended policies. Again, these are more those highly advisable policy areas. So those are things maybe related to establishing an audit committee, accounting and financial reporting policies, revenue policies, expenditures, risk management and internal control, and then local economic development policies. Here we just have some sort of tips and things you might want to consider as you're writing and putting together your policies. I'm going to skip over this one. And then this is just kind of an outline of a high level, how you want to approach your policy development. I'm going to jump now into very much related to this. The next recommendation is that we really recommend that you all create a separate fund for your capital reserves and your capital projects. Today, the way you budget is you include those things in your regular operating. You kind of keep capital funds and operating funds together, and we're sort of saying you should separate those out. Part of that is supported by GASB, the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, sets generally accepted accounting principles, which outlines again that capital projects funds can be used to account for and report financial resources that are restricted, committed, or assigned to expenditure for capital outlays. So again, GAAP provides for these, and we think that you all should really go ahead and be taking advantage of using these capital projects. And why those are needed, by separating out your capital projects and those expenditures in a different fund, it really does avoid distorting your operating trend data, right? There's often spikes due to seasonality, peak periods of construction, that sort of a thing. So you get that out of your operating fund. It also then allows for you to have, right, capital projects are often, multi-year in nature. And so you can do that. Your operating budget is more of an annual thing, but you can have multi-year appropriations in a capital projects funds. And then it also just provides sort of some clarity of the intent and use of what those capital reserves are really for. So kind of the next steps here is, again, just establishing some policies and procedures and then establishing those funds. And then the policies and procedures, I'm going to talk much more about that because, again, then flowing out of those first two recommendations, the next recommendation we have for you is to develop a capital plan. And so a capital improvement plan, right, describes the capital investments that the government intends to take over a multi-year period. Slightly different from the capital budget, right, which is your allocation of funds for capital project expenditures for the upcoming budget period. So in most cases, right, you might have a 3 to 5 year, some places even have longer, maybe a 10-year capital plan, capital improvement plan, and then you're updating that every year, and then the first year of that CIP becomes your capital budget for the following year. So again, key to this is developing some policies, before you jump into outlining your plan, you want to have some policies. And again, here we have the list of different things that need to be included in your policy. And I'm going to touch on each of these in a little bit more detail. And we'll also say we've provided GFOA on its website has a policy template that outlines a lot of this information. So we have that you can almost use as like a starting point as you are developing this policy. So again, one thing we want the policy to address is the scope of the CIP. So right, that includes like how many years should it cover? Again, 5 years is probably the most common that we see, but it can be less. Sometimes we see 3 years. And it can be longer, but most often when we see it longer, it's for really infrastructure intensive operations like a utility or a transit authority, something like that. You also want to include, when we're talking about the scope, is sort of the definition, right? What are you going to consider a capital project, right? And that could vary depending on lots of different factors. So again, but you want to understand what are you going to, those projects that you put in your capital projects funds, they're going to have a little bit additional scrutiny, right, as we're figuring out what's going to get funded. So you want to figure out what basis you're going to use for pulling out those projects that are going to get a little extra scrutiny. And again, that could differ from the definition of capital assets that you track for accounting purposes. So some things to consider as you're figuring out that definition, right, are dollar thresholds, the life expectancy, the impact on the organization and the community, and then different project classifications. So IT investments, land acquisition, maybe new construction of a building or building renovations. So some combination of these things are variables you'd want to consider as you're setting that definition. And again, here's just kind of an example of some different definitions. The other thing you want your policy to outline is how you're going to identify projects and how departments can submit those for consideration. You also want the policy to outline who's going to be included in developing the capital improvement plan, who's responsible for the various parts. Right, you want to, the goal of this and have, why you want to have this written down is to have just establish those really clear responsibilities for who's evaluating projects, who's creating the document, that kind of a thing. And again, this doesn't have to get into a lot of detail because you can do that in your procedures, but at the high level, you want to at least outline who's responsible for what. You also want your policy to touch on how projects are going to be selected to be included in the capital improvement plan. You want to use objective criteria, and then again, we have some examples of different criteria that you could include. This is an example of a project evaluation template. This comes from a publication of ours. So again, just an example of how you could sort of use the criteria then to sort of assess and evaluate different projects. You might also want your policy to take into consideration operating budget impacts. We know when we're making capital investments that often they're going to have some impact on the operating budget, right? You're building something new. Maybe you're going to have to staff that facility or maintain a building, that kind of a thing. So you just want to be making sure that you're taking account of those, considering those upfront as you're outlining the capital plan. Again, some examples of operating budget impacts. An example of how you might track those operating budget impacts over time, right? This is looking at a couple of new facilities or a few new facilities and sort of how many new FTE are going to be needed to staff each of those. So just an example, again, of how one local government has done it. There's lots of different ways you could do that. The other point that we think your policy should address is the fact, we make a distinction between a balanced CIP and a wish list CIP. And a balanced CIP means that the expenditures included in the CIP equal the estimated resources that are going to be available for capital spending. Again, this is a more disciplined approach than just a wish list saying, hey, this is everything that we hope to do or we'd like to do over the next 5 years. Again, you're just listing things, but you're never going to have enough money to do those. We really want your CIP to sort of be a plan for what you think you can afford, what you will be able to do over a certain period of time. However, we do think, and we have this example from Peoria, Arizona, it is nice to keep track, though, of those other unfunded projects. And so again, in Peoria, they have a policy, their policy directs the city manager to present a balanced CIP to the city council for approval, but then Peoria's staff compiles an unfunded project list separately. Again, it kind of helps the council and the staff recognize those critical but currently unfunded projects, and then again to sort of facilitate discussion on how down the road we might be able to redirect resources towards those projects. So you want to definitely keep track of those unfunded things, but not but keep them separate from the actual CIP itself. Also want your policy to speak to or address sort of your strategies for funding the CIP and what those preferred strategies might be. Again, you could consider debt versus current resources. Know that the city currently does not, go out regularly selling debt, not using a ton of bond resources. So you're more using what we would call pay-as-you-go or PAYGO resources, or maybe sometimes even grant resources. Again, this might include capital reserves, again, one-time resources like grants. But you might want to think about, going forward, dedicating a portion of certain regular revenue streams to capital reserves. Or sometimes, right, and you might even establish a dedicated revenue stream just for that. So again, once you have your plan in place, you can kind of then begin to think about how do we want to fund this, right? What kind of resources can we find to put towards this? Some other capital policies that you might want to put in place or, relate to budgeting, project management, and asset maintenance. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about these, but again, we've got some sort of suggestions here for what your capital budget policy could look like. Project management, again, it makes sense for your policy to deal with this just because project management is such a critical piece in terms of making sure that these projects are successful and that there is a project manager, and again, you're keeping them on schedule and your specs are being met and that kind of a thing. You also may want to consider some other things related to project management, and again, these are some examples from different cities, a city in Delaware and then California. Right, they put a sunset on the authorization, the budget authorization. They also have policies related to budget carryover and then limits on amendments. Similar, they commit in their policies to doing regular progress reviews and then also have policies related to project completion and project closeout. Also want to think about including asset maintenance in your capital policy. Again, this is really a big part of what we, a lot of what we fund in our CIP is kind of asset maintenance types of things, making sure that we're keeping our roads and other types of infrastructure in good shape. And again, we need to be dedicating funding for that. So as it relates to the capital improvement plan, this recommendation number 3, sort of the next steps there are, again, to develop and adopt some policies, and then develop procedures, including a project submission form, a project evaluation form, and then convene a group to begin developing that CIP. Recommendation number 4 here. And again, 4, 5, and 6 are a little bit more related and kind of build on one another. So the first part, recommendation number 4 is to develop a program inventory. And this is really what we would consider to be sort of the first step toward implementing a priority-based budget, which is a more transparent way of budgeting because it shows what the government does and how much it costs. It's a little bit more meaningful both to the governing body and to the public because programs are directly related to how the public experiences public services. So a program budget is organized into service areas rather than just departments and line items. So we've got a couple of slides here on sort of how do you identify programs and how do you define a program and really what makes a program. Again, I'm not going to go into too much detail on this, but again, often we think about a program, it's broader than a line item or simple task, but it's more detailed than a department or an entire function. It's a discrete service that leads to an identifiable result or benefit. So again, we have some questions you can kind of think about to, as you're thinking through, well, is this a program? Is that a program? Kind of things to think about here, right? Do you advertise it? Are you mandated to provide it? Is someone willing to pay a fee or offer a grant? And do you offer the service to a particular group or demographic? The answer to any of these is yes, then it most likely would be considered a program in terms of budgeting. And then what's the right number of programs, right? This is a question that often comes up, and it's sort of like, it depends, right? Like it's not unusual though that we've seen, a moderate sized government to have anywhere from 300 to 500 programs, right? So you shouldn't be afraid of having too many. It's sort of, there's no right number, I guess. The next step there, after you've developed that program inventory, the next step would to be to conduct some budget planning workshops. And the why, right? Why are we doing this? And really the purpose of this would be to set your vision, goals, and priorities for the upcoming budget period. And when you have that program inventory, right, that's going to allow for a little bit more meaningful conversation about the city's priorities. You could incorporate data about what each program has accomplished and what it would like to accomplish in the upcoming budget year. Right, we want to include the mayor, the city council, department heads in these workshops. And then a long-term goal might even to be consider incorporating public engagement into those workshops as well. And then again, building out of this is to implement a priority-based budget. And so again, why would we do this, right? Well, some of the benefits here, again, we're promoting transparency by showing, again, what the government does and how much it costs. And again, a more meaningful way. We're providing a language for meaningful discussions about making budgeting trade-offs among services. And we're showing how the workforce is associated with programs, which allows governments to better integrate succession planning into the budget process as well. And then we've got a little bit on sort of how we do this, right? So you've got to determine what the costs are associated, right? You've got your program inventory, and then you have to start beginning to figure out, well, what are the costs associated with each of those programs? We call that, again, program costing, and we've got the 5 steps outlined here on sort of how we do that. So I have some slides that go into more detail on each of these. You can see here the 5th step is optional. That would be associating revenue with each program. Again, that's nice to do, but it's not always necessary. But yeah, step 1 would be to distinguish between those costs that are recurring versus non-recurring, right? One-time costs versus things that happen every year. Step 2 is distinguishing between personnel and non-personnel. Step 3 is then associating personnel with the programs that they provide, and that's often going to be sort of more than one program, right? I'm an employee, I probably support multiple programs. And again, this sometimes can be difficult, right? We don't always divide up our time as employees, saying, oh, this is how I spend my whole day. So it doesn't have to be the most scientific thing in the world. Sometimes it's just easier to do like a simple survey of the employees or even their supervisor, just to get a reasonable estimate. And again, then you start to allocate the non-personnel costs to programs. And again, you'll have to develop, there's any number of ways to do this, but you just develop a method that makes sense and kind of, you document that and kind of use that across the board. And then again, the 5th step is this optional step, to associate revenues with each of the programs as well. So again, on 4, 5, and 6, right, I have this slide, I think kind of nicely shows how they come together, right? You've got your program inventory, layer that on top of the priorities that you've established from those budget planning workshops, and then that kind of leads into your priority-based budget. So again, just kind of reminder, closing out here, these were those recommendations. Again, 1, 2, and 3 were the more short-term ones and really focused. The goal there is to develop that capital improvement plan. And then the more intermediate and long-term recommendations are really the outcome there that we're looking for is to eventually have this priority-based budget. So building on first with that program inventory, then conducting those budget planning workshops to really get consensus on what the priorities are, and then implement that priority-based budget. And again, kind of just wanted to share this one more time, kind of each of the, by doing this, right, we're building up each of those pillars for the city, and again, really building a stronger financial foundation for you all for the long term. So with that, I'm going to stop talking for a second and give you all a chance to ask me any questions.
Counselors, a lot of information, good information, new ideas on methods to implement a different mentality in our budgeting right off the bat. Does anyone have any questions that they'd like clarified? We are going to spend some more time together at the retreat to go over these recommendations and have some more information with Katie and her team. So you can sure digest the PowerPoint presentation that she's provided. Probably will generate a few questions and go from there. But any questions?
I know it's a lot to digest, so I completely understand if you'd like some time.
Yeah, that was good information, and definitely a lot of information. I'm sure questions will come forth, Katie, but we sure appreciate you and your team for the hard work you've done in bringing us a series of recommendations to maybe make more sense in our budgeting process. And I really like the idea of separating the capital cost from the general budget, and some good ideas there. And I'm sure more questions will come forward once we get a chance to digest this.
Yeah, great. No, that sounds wonderful. Again, we've been really excited to be working with you all. So much opportunity here to really make some great impact, right? And change for you've got a good budget process, but I think, we can make it even better. So we're really excited to be working.
Great. Well, now if we can just find money to put in the budget, we'll be good to go. Matt's working on that. Right? Katie, thank you. And I look forward to discussing this further with you here as we move forward towards our retreat.
Great.
And thanks for all that you've done.
No problem. We'll see you all soon.
Okay. Thanks, Katie. Okay, counselors, feel free to dig through that presentation and prepare any questions you may have, but just to get an idea of what GFOA has offered to our group as far as a new idea and outlook on budgeting. Some good ideas, and it'll take some work to get there. We're going to move on to the public hearings section of our agenda. And Matt, I don't want to override you. Did you have any? You had? Okay. Item number 1 under our public hearings is a public hearing on an application for a restaurant liquor license by Encore Cinemas, Incorporated, doing business as Star Stadium Theaters, located at 2441 Foothill Boulevard, Unit 0007, Rock Springs, of which we'll take action under new business item number 1. Is there anyone here tonight wishing to speak on this public hearing?
Your Honor.
Councilman Zadi.
Is there anybody here from the theaters that could address some questions from council, possibly?
I believe so. Come on down. You sit in the back all you want, but it's good deal. Could you, for the record, just let everybody know what your name is, and we'll hit you with some questions.
Sure. My name is Jonathan Crawford. I am the general manager for the Star Stadium in Rock Springs, and been there for a while. So,
thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you,
Councilman Zadi.
Well, I know just among conversation amongst ourselves, I heard some questions. I guess we want more detail. What are your plans in getting this liquor license as far as service, limits of service? What are you going to be serving? Kind of.
Yeah, absolutely.
Story.
A very basic overview. We're going to keep it very simple. We're going to have prepackaged drinks, 6 to 8 options, being beers and boxed wines, perhaps. We're working on those options currently with local distributors and state. We will, of course, have trained, tips-trained employees, also employees of the appropriate age. We've designated specific locations with cameras and locked coolers of sorts. We're also working on acquiring technology that will scan driver's licenses, passports, veteran IDs, and it will actually work really cool with our new software where as soon as we scan it, it'll, tell us age appropriate and what they're allowed. It will record the transaction and keep that in a database for us. So we're planning a limit of 2 drinks per visit, per ID. So I know there've been some worries about how much you'd be able to acquire, but our goal is, a comfortable amount, but not overdoing it. So we're excited about that technology option. And I believe that's the general basis I have.
I guess brings a question on privacy and storing data, people's data. How long are you storing that for? Where is it stored? And what exactly are you collecting as far as personal data?
Perfect. That's a great question. I'm not sure on the length of storage, but as I believe, it's a private database local to the theater, not sending it to the cloud or anything. And it would just calculate how many times that person had visited. I can check with the vendor to make sure that it's, that not even myself. I believe it's just a pop-up that explains like go or no-go situation.
So it could be something, I come in on Monday, I have a couple drinks, and then I come in Friday, and your
Absolutely.
system's gonna tell you I came in Monday, had 2 drinks, and now I'm back again Friday and having 2
As
drinks.
far as I believe, it wouldn't tell us that. As far as I believe, it would just say, this person has not purchased more than 2 drinks today.
That would be something personally I'd like to just know is, 'cause
Yeah.
I'm just all about personal safety and privacy and everything else, is
Absolutely.
how long is that information retained, and how or when are your records purged, and how
Yeah.
often?
That's a good question. I will definitely investigate for you. In the brief on the technology, it just stipulated that it would stay local on my machines. No one outside could access it, and that's as far as I recall. But I will look into that.
Okay.
Thanks, Jonathan. Any other questions?
Mr. Mayor.
Councilman Ronson.
So what type of security or precautions will you have in place to ensure that I don't come in, get my drink, and give it to my 15-year-old kid?
Right. Having taken the TIPS training course, I know we will, of course, require anyone who's able to authorize that sale to take that TIPS training course. It will just be, at our best efforts to be able to say, like, keep an eye on this person and watch them as we can. We also have cameras, that lead a ways to the auditoriums, and so I guess once they get into an auditorium, if they decide to hand it off, it'll be up to managers who do occasionally patrol auditoriums to keep an eye on that. Other than that, we have options of mall security coming by, and but I guess that's about where we are. Yeah.
Your Honor,
Councilman West.
I know you guys applied for some permits for the University of Wyoming football games. Is that a pretty smooth process? No issues there with serving beverages and things of that nature?
Yeah, we worked out, I thought, a pretty decent system. We had our serving area, and we actually borrowed the city's ID scanners, a really cool machine. And we had a two drink limit, and for the game, everybody was, extraordinarily behaved and happy just to have the option. I thought it was a good deal, and excited to see how the public embraced it. So if only COVID hadn't been such a big deal. We bought 6 licenses in advance for the games, and then 4 of them got canceled due to COVID. So when this became an option, we thought, well, this would be a better deal for us.
Well, it sounds like you're keeping pretty tight wraps on it. At first when this became a request, we were thinking, oh boy, I know you host UFC fights and things like that, so
Sure.
we weren't sure, kind of how policed it would be, but it sounds like you're just trying to implement something and see how it goes, and ultimately, if it's a bad deal, I guess you'll be back next year asking for a reapproval as well. So
Yes,
appreciate the
absolutely.
info.
And we've launched it in Cheyenne a few months ago. Seems to be going well there. Casper just got theirs started. Well, actually, Laramie just got theirs started last week, and so I'm happy to learn from them and see how they succeed. So
Thank you.
Your Honor.
Councilman Hickerson.
So you said 2 drinks per visit per ID. So if I were to bring in my passport and my driver's license, I could get 4 drinks. Is that correct?
I suppose if the software allows it, but I assume that it would be smart enough to identify if it's truly looking at ID, it would know you're the same person.
Thank you.
Your Honor,
Councilman Batolo.
you mentioned the security cameras. If there was an incident, you'd keep that record for how long, you know, based on what security Rob brought up earlier? How long would that be kept?
Are you talking our current video security?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Our current system has a capacity for 11 days, 24/7. And we have about 20 cameras in the building.
Any other questions? Jonathan, I appreciate the information, and hopefully it'll let us, allow us to make a good decision here as it comes before us under new business item number 1.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, and I would ask, is there anyone else here tonight wishing to speak on this public hearing? Hearing none, item number 2 is a public hearing on applications for renewal of microbrewery, winery, restaurant, retail, limited bar and grill, and resort liquor licenses for the period of April 1st, 2022 through March 31st, 2023, of which we'll take action under new business item number 2. Is there anyone here tonight wishing to speak on this public hearing? Don't everyone rush to the podium. Okay, we're going to move on to the petitions. I would ask if there is anyone here tonight wishing to speak on any issue whatsoever. This would be your time to do so. Any issue. Okay, hearing none, I'm going to close the petitions and we're going to move on to the officers and staff reports. Counselors, we have item number 1, the health insurance fund recap for January 2022. 2, the financial report summary for January 2022. And 3, the acknowledgement of receipt of financial disclosure statements. Counselors, I would entertain a motion to approve the officer and staff reports and place on file.
Your Honor,
Councilman Miptolo,
so moved.
we do have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's been called. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, councilors, it's going to move us on to the council committee and board reports. We have 1 item, Rock Springs Historical Museum Board meeting minutes of January 12, 2022. And I would ask, are there any other committee or board reports that wish to come forward at this time? Hearing none, councilors, I would entertain a motion to approve the council committee and board reports. Item number 1, the Rock Springs Historical Museum Board meeting minutes of January 12, 2022.
So moved, Your Honor.
We do have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's been called. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's going to move us on to the bills and claims section of our agenda. Councilors, item number 1 is the bills and claims for February 15, 2022. What's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilwoman,
I
I almost said Wendorf. Demas?
make a motion to approve the bills and claims for February 15th, 2022.
We do have a motion to approve the bills and claims for February 15, 2022. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's been called. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Item number 2 is the salaries for February 7, 2022. Councilors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilwoman Demas.
I make a motion to approve the salaries for February 7th, 2022.
We do have a motion to approve the salaries for February 7, 2022. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second has been called. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, councilors, it's going to move us on to our new business items. We have 8 new business items. The first being the request for a restaurant liquor license by Encore Cinemas Incorporated, doing business as Star Stadium Theaters, located at 2441 Foothill Boulevard, Unit 0007, Rock Springs. Councilors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilwoman Demus.
I make a motion to approve this request.
Councilors, we do have a motion to approve this request. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's been called. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed?
No.
Let the record show we have one in opposition. Okay, item number 2 is a request from the Administrative Services Department for approval of renewal applications for microbrewery, winery, restaurant, retail, limited bar and grill, and resort liquor licenses for the period of April 1st, 2022 through March 31st, 2023. Councilors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilwoman Robinson?
I move to approve this request.
Councilman Robinson? I do apologize. It's led into the council. We do have a motion. I may have called you Councilwoman. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
we do have a motion to approve this request.
Often
Do we have a
questioned.
second? Do we have a second?
Second.
We do have a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
Let the record show. Item number 3 is a request from Engineering Operations and Public Services Department for permission to request the Joint Powers Water Board to apply for a WWDC Level 2 study for the East Side System Capacity Improvement Project. Councilors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilman Patolo?
move to approve this request.
We do have a motion to honor this request. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's been called. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, item number 4 is a request from the Rock Springs Chamber of Commerce for approval of the first annual 4th of July holiday parade route to take place on July 4th, 2022, with closures beginning at 9 a.m. Councilors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilman Hickerson?
I move to approve this request.
We do have a motion to approve this request. Do we have a second?
second.
Second's been called. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, moving on to item number 5 is a recommendation from the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board to update the fee structures. And I would just like to give a shout out to the board. Several weeks investigation, in my opinion, made some good recommendations back to the council, and I think they're well deserved and time to do so. So thank you for that. Councilors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilman West?
I got a quick comment or maybe question for
You bet.
Dave. I know we talked, Dave, about the golf cart rentals and being able to rent like a season pass, or it looks like you implemented some punch card options that we haven't had in the past, so I appreciate that. It seems like it's difficult whether is it for a single seat or a 2 seat, so you guys must have felt like just having a punch card option would be sufficient. Can you elaborate on that at all, or you haven't had that in the past, as I recall?
So, Mayor, Councilor West, the board did talk about a number of those things, including things like driving range annual passes and whatnot, but felt like that the offerings that we had, I think, were fairly, sufficient. And with respect to golf cart seats, if there's 2 riders, then obviously we charge, both seats. But if there's only 1 rider and we can't find a rider for the second seat in a cart, say a threesome or something, they only pay for the 1 seat. Is that how you interpreted that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, yeah, I think they looked at a number of different things, but we're, I guess, hesitant to expand on too many of those things. We did talk with Aaron, the golf pro, as well, on a number of those things, on not so much what his opinion of, different fees and that were, but the manageability of it and at the front end. And that's sometimes what drives whether or not they think that's an option that we would have, or if it's a manageable or doable option. If we can't enforce or control things like resident and non-residents, kind of part of this as well, then you usually don't see any of that. So sometimes it's driven by, can you even do this, Aaron, or can't you do this at the front end? And so, yeah, I think these were the areas that they were comfortable with, which were only a couple changes this year. And you can see stayed completely away from across-the-board increases as
Right.
well.
Right.
And I researched it today. It seemed like throughout the state, there's some that just do punch cards, some do seasonal pass, some do both. I mean, to me, I thought it was kind of a simplistic thing to implement, but I think there's more to it than what seems simplistic. So I appreciate the punch card option and for considering that with the board. So just want to say thanks for that. And I would move to approve this request, Your Honor.
Councilors, we do have a motion to approve this request from the Recs Board. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's been called. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, item number 6 is a amended request from the Rock Springs Main Street URA for permission to apply for a CLG grant from the Wyoming State Historical Office to assist with terracotta restoration for the First Security Bank building in the amount of $45,848. I believe it went up about $6,000 or so, councilors. What's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilman Robinson?
I move to approve this request.
We do have a motion to approve this request. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's been called. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, item number 8. 7, request from the Rock Springs Liquor Dealers Association for approval of the 2022 all-night bar dates. Councilors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilman Batolo?
move to approve this request.
We do have a motion to honor this request. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's been called. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Item number 8, a request from Santa Fe Trail Incorporated for permission to transfer their liquor license to cater a wedding reception at the Expedition Island Pavilion in Green River on June 11, 2022 from 4 p.m. to midnight. Councilors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilwoman Demas?
I make a motion to approve this request.
We do have a motion to honor this request. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's been called. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, councilors, we're going to move on to the resolution section of our agenda. We have 9 resolutions. Item number 1, Resolution 2022-11.
A resolution accepting and approving a lease agreement between the City of Rock Springs and the Rock Springs Renewal Fund, Inc. for a lease of the main lobby of the Broadway Theater and authorizing Timothy A. Como as mayor of the City of Rock Springs and Matthew L. McBurnett as city clerk of the City of Rock Springs to execute said lease on behalf of the City of Rock Springs.
Councilors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilman West?
move to approve resolution 2022-11.
We do have a motion to approve Resolution 2022-11. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's been called. Roll call.
Counselor Hickerson,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Savage,
Yes.
Batolo,
Yes.
Halter,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Demas,
Yes.
Zadi,
Yes.
Mayor Como.
Yes. Item number 2, Resolution 2022-12.
A resolution accepting and approving an airport improvement program agreement for transfer of entitlements from the Southwest Wyoming Regional Airport Board to Central Wyoming Regional Airport in the amount of $1 million and authorizing Timothy A. Como as the mayor of the City of Rock Springs to execute the agreement on behalf of the City of Rock Springs, on behalf of the city, and authorizing Matthew L. McBurnett as the city clerk to attest to said agreement.
Councilors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilman West?
move to approve resolution 2022-12.
Councilors, we do have a motion to approve Resolution 2022-12. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's been called. Roll call.
Counselor West,
Yes.
Savage,
Yes.
Batolo,
Yes.
Halter,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Demas,
Yes.
Zadi,
Yes.
Hickerson,
Yes.
Mayor Como.
Yes. Item number 3, Resolution 2022-13.
A resolution accepting and approving a concessions rent relief airport rescue grant agreement, Part 1, offer between the U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Aviation Administration, and the City of Rock Springs, and authorizing Timothy A. Como as mayor of the City of Rock Springs, Wyoming, to execute said grant agreement on behalf of said city.
Councilors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilwoman Demus.
I make a motion to approve Resolution 2022-13.
We do have a motion to approve Resolution 2022-13. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's been called. Roll call.
Counselor Savage,
Yes.
Batolo,
Yes.
Halter,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Demus,
Yes.
Zadi,
Yes.
Hickerson,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Mayor Como.
Yes. Item number 4, Resolution 2022-14.
A resolution accepting the agreement to provide services and a service order between the Daigle Law Group LLC, Power, DMS, and the City of Rock Springs, Wyoming, and authorizing Timothy A. Como, Mayor of the City of Rock Springs, Wyoming, and Matthew L. McBurnan as City Clerk of the City of Rock Springs, Wyoming, to execute said agreement and service order on behalf of the city.
Councilors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor.
Councilman Patola, was it?
Yeah. Move to approve Resolution 2022-14.
We do have a motion to approve Resolution 2022-14. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's been called. Roll call.
Counselor Batolo,
Yes.
Halter,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Demus,
Yes.
Zadi,
Yes.
Hickerson,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Savage,
Yes.
Mayor Como.
Yes. Item number 5, Resolution 2022-15.
A resolution approving local financial institutions to be designated as depositories for public funds.
Councilors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilman West.
move to approve Resolution 2022-15.
We do have a motion to approve Resolution 2022-15. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's been called. Roll call.
Counselor Halter,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Demus,
Yes.
Zadi,
Yes.
Hickerson,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Savage,
Yes.
Batolo,
Yes.
Mayor Como.
Yes. Item number 6, Resolution 2022-16.
A resolution accepting and approving a change request to the open-end lease rate quotes provided to the City of Rock Springs with the Master Equity Lease Agreement by Enterprise Fleet Management for the lease of 2021 vehicles for the Rock Springs Police Department, and authorizing Timothy A. Como as Mayor of the City of Rock Springs to execute said lease on quotes on behalf of said city.
Councilors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor.
Councilman Patolo.
Move to approve 2022-16.
We do have a motion to approve Resolution 2022-16. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's been called. Roll call.
Counselor Robinson,
Yes.
Demus,
Yes.
Zadi,
Yes.
Hickerson,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Savage,
This is, I think, the third rate increase, and we still haven't even got one vehicle. I'm a no.
Batolo,
Yes.
Halter,
Yes.
Mayor Como.
Yes. Item number 7, Resolution 2022-17.
A resolution accepting and approving an amendment to the NPS Main Street Facade Improvement Grant Program Agreement between National Main Street Center, a subsidiary of the Trust for Historic Preservation, and the City of Rock Springs, and authorizing Timothy A. Como as Mayor of the City of Rock Springs, Wyoming, to execute said amended grant agreement on behalf of said city.
Councilors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilwoman Demus.
I make a motion to approve Resolution 2022-17.
We do have a motion to approve Resolution 2022-17. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's been called. Roll call.
Counselor Demus,
Yes.
Zadi,
Yes.
Hickerson,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Savage,
Yes.
Batolo,
Yes.
Halter,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Mayor Como.
Yes, and I'd just like to give a shout out to the National Main Street Center and URA. This goes a long way in our downtown, increasing that from 18 to 25. That takes care of a couple more buildings we normally may not be able to do. So always trying to improve our downtown is good for the entire city. Item number 8, Resolution 2022-18.
A resolution accepting a Sweetwater BOCES acceptance of grant and conditions between Sweetwater BOCES and the City of Rock Springs, and authorizing Timothy A. Como as mayor of the City of Rock Springs, Wyoming, to execute said grant on behalf of said city.
Councilors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilman Savage.
I move to approve Resolution 2022-18.
We do have a motion to approve Resolution 2022-18. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's been called. Roll call.
Counselor Zadi,
Yes.
Hickerson,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Savage,
Yes.
Batolo,
Yes.
Halter,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Demus,
Yes.
Mayor Como.
Yes, and another shout out to Polcy's City of Rock Springs PD Animal Control and Rock Springs High School, working together to try to create opportunities that help the entire community, as well as create an additional employee and someone that, who knows, may take a liking to animal control and be there throughout the entire career. Right, Commander? Okay, item number 9, Resolution 2022-19.
A resolution accepting and approving a LexisNexis Risk Solutions government application and agreement for the Track cell phone lookup and tracking service, and authorizing Timothy A. Como as mayor of the City of Rock Springs, Wyoming, to execute said agreement on behalf of said city.
Okay, councilors, what's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Mr. President?
move to approve Resolution 2022-19.
We do have a motion to approve Resolution 2022-19. Do we have a second?
Second.
We do have a second. Roll call.
Counselor Hickerson,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Savage,
Yes.
Batolo,
Yes.
Halter,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Demus,
Yes.
Zadi,
Yes.
Mayor Como.
Yes. Councilors, going to move us on to our ordinances. We have 2 ordinances, both on third reading. Ordinance 2022-02, third reading.
An ordinance amending Article 7-6 entitled Contractor Licensing of the Ordinances of the City of Rock Springs, Wyoming.
Councilors, third reading. What's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilman Savage?
I move to approve Ordinance 2022-02.
We do have a motion to approve Ordinance 2022-02. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's been called. Roll call.
Counselor West,
Yes.
Savage,
Yes.
Batolo,
Yes.
Halter,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Demus,
Yes.
Zadi,
Yes.
Hickerson,
Yes.
Mayor Como.
Yes. Councilors, item number 2, Ordinance 2022-03, third reading.
An ordinance amending Article 7-1 entitled Building Code of the Ordinances of the City of Rock Springs, Wyoming.
Councilors, third reading. What's your pleasure?
Your Honor,
Councilman Batolo?
move to approve ordinance 2022-03.
We do have a motion to approve Ordinance 2022-03. Do we have a second?
Second.
Second's been called. Roll call.
Counselor Savage,
Yes.
Batolo,
Yes.
Halter,
Yes.
Robinson,
Yes.
Demus,
Yes.
Zadi,
Yes.
Hickerson,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Mayor Como.
Yes, and with no further business to come before the city council, this meeting is adjourned.